with a prayer, which is described as the prayer of refuge and bodhicitta. So the meaning of the words Geshe will recite now is I take refuge until I attain enlightenment in the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Supreme Assembly. And through the merit that I accumulate by practicing giving and the other perfections, may I become a Buddha for the benefit of all sentient beings.
Janchu bardu dani kyapsuji dagi jinso ripe sonamki drola benche sangye drupash. Janchu bardu dani kyapsuji dagi jinso ripe sonamki drola benche sangye Chonama janchu bardu dani kyapsuji dagi jinso ripe sonamki drola benche sangye drupash.
So Geshe has heard that many of the people present here today previously did a course on the Lamrim, on the graduated stages of the path to enlightenment for a few days, and thereafter you did a retreat on that. So therefore Geshe's suggestion would be, if there's anything you find difficult to understand, any topic that you learned during that time, that you heard about, that you found difficult to understand, please say so, and then Geshe will give his best to explain that, to clarify it further. So actually there are two ways, two kind of aspects to a topic that Geshe could go more into. One would be one that is difficult to understand, and another one that that doesn't make sense to you, as in like it's not that difficult to understand, but it doesn't really make sense. You find it difficult to fathom. So, anything?
Yeah. All theories of Buddhism can be had in this life. What about the rebirth?
Oh, what about rebirth?
Yes, can check in this life or just because it's seasonal, or can we experience that in this life?
Can you become Buddha in one lifetime? Is that your question?
No.
What?
I mean, all the theories of Buddhism can check in this life.
Can they be applied in just one lifetime? Anything more? Any other issues you find difficult, etc.?
It's about emptiness. We talked a lot about that, and we can elaborate a little and then.
Tony quality, Tony quality, Mombuji Jaya, the Tony Tola, I get it, Sejin.
Then, yeah, I'm in that picture moment. Tanda Kasurian. Kiwachi Tagarami Tola, Tishasan Tugure, Senata, Kiwachiki, Tagarami Tone, and Chinshi, Chasan Tisha.
Basically, in response to your question, all the different topics, can they be explained from the point of view of just one lifetime? And in answer to that, no, that's not possible. It cannot be fitted, if you like, in just one lifetime. That was your question? No? What was your question?
Yeah.
Can you tell me your question again? Because then I think I misunderstood.
All the theories of Buddhism can be tracked. It is
소연한데서 다 차선지가 소소 리베톤을 두트야지. 다 겨나지 때 간대이나 겨나지 뒤한 세배 두트고.
다디 오늘은 리버 빼는 윤기 더 리버도 당시어와 모두 그리고시 이제 싫어해. 다만 비슈는 놀라는 윤기 조당 많이 믹스기 리버도 당시 그 모두 그런 심주 맞지 숨긴기 되다 숨을 심주지를 터내야 그리 무연히 지포에 리버도 당시 숨을 이 차선 도는데 차선 리뷰 두고 그래. 또 모두 리뷰 전에 기지시로이나 차선 리뷰 두고 말해. 모두 리뷰 두고 말해.
So in actuality, there are different types of reasoning that can establish, that can prove something. Now, oftentimes we talk about a reasoning from the point of view of the fact, of the actual object, where you address exactly the object itself and establish it. So, but there are some topics in Buddhism where you can't utilize, you can't use that kind of reasoning. Instead, you check the person who taught, for instance, a certain topic, like the person who taught the topic. What is he taught? So based on that, there's a type of reasoning by way of which you can then prove this specific point. You can establish that. But then there are other points, other concepts, you can actually utilize the reasoning in terms of just straight get at the reasoning itself. So in general, therefore, Geshe says that you can prove anything. Anything, you can establish the existence or the validity of anything that is taught in Buddhism, except you have different reasonings that you need to apply. So to give you an example, so you have the explanation of after your death, you can be reborn in special places. They're called pure realms, where you can receive Dharma teachings. You have all the conditions complete, very conducive conditions to be able to receive Dharma teachings and practice. Well, this cannot be established through this type of reasoning that was mentioned before, by power of the fact. To actually address that fact itself, you need different types of reasoning, different type of reasoning to establish that.
That is the to the Julian the Tesca Howard. And then Shen Haboche, robot in the name of the Parasite Robokashi, Chigai Chigai.
But it is difficult to prove some of these concepts through reasoning. So Geshe says in his own case, like sometimes you find it very difficult to establish something, and then you discuss it with your friends, and in reaction to that, Geshe said some of his friends would say, well, half of it I believe, half of it I don't. So that means you've actually not established a certain point by way of reasoning. But in terms of past and future life, that can be directly established by way of the reasoning through the power of the fact. So not only has it been said that it's possible to establish past and future life through this type of reasoning, Geshe says from his own experience, it is definitely possible because he's given it a lot of thought. He's gone through a lot of reasoning, and every time he's gone through a different type of reasoning, he felt it became clearer and clearer in his mind that past and future lives exist. So with regard to emptiness, Geshe is saying in this short period of time we have here together to explain your emptiness would be difficult to really make it clear. So if you come on Saturday and Sunday, Geshe will talk about emptiness. The main topic will be emptiness.
When you talk about reasoning, is that different from the experiential understandings we can get from meditation? Are you talking intellectual?
die Jigbe Drup Sea de Tata Onyaning on Drup Sigarayan, Jigbe Drup Lea de Samudron, Diati, Sambat Samji Drubes.
Gonyam Ning Tone Drup Lea de Data Penata Susan Yongu Tone, in whom Penat Nutuala, Yamuti de Jim, do Kangatin in Yongutu. And Tila Kate Chan, Nimbo Tene, Meva Chan, she did it to Yongutu, the Zumato, and Yongu to be Kijamaro. That's a bit true and Rashi never contested it. Mitawa Yintan Kantese. It is only a long to Kijabito. Kumzenque, the Kungichin, and to be Kijigora.
So, in terms of here, it's a little bit difficult to find the right term.
What was the question?
Pardon?
What was the question?
Oh, I'll repeat the question, sorry. His question is with regard to establishing something through reasoning. Is Geshe talking about reasoning by way of experience, through kind of meditation and experience, or is he talking about intellectual reasoning? So in response to that, Geshe says, well, when we talk about experiential reasoning, like experiential kind of practice, Geshe says, for instance, you think of your own afflictions, think of your own afflictive emotions, and become aware of them, and then understand through your own experience how they create suffering, how then you can apply certain antidotes in order to eliminate them, etc. So this is through your own experience. While here the reasoning that Geshe talks about is reasoning with regard to, for instance, do phenomena exist inherently or not? So what is the problem if you say they exist inherently? How can you establish that they do not? So you really apply reasoning as in terms of the validity of the lack of inherent existence. That's the kind of reasoning. So you apply reasoning. This is not through your experience in that moment, but just really apply reasoning to understand this, to understand the validity of a certain concept.
According with the main books from Alan Wallace, after you realize emptiness is the possibility to do extraordinary things like remote vision and mentally control physical phenomena, right? My question is, I know this is not the ultimate goal, but anyway, it could be a sign for all the world about the extraordinary path of the enlightenment, of the emptiness realization. So why you don't show more to the world?
Why not show more?
Yeah, that has power. More
Should
in public.
Okay. Should I first repeat? I'll repeat the question. Okay. So his question is that he's heard through the book by Alan Wallace that once you realize emptiness, you're able to, you generate certain abilities, kind of special abilities such as clairvoyance, like clairvoyant abilities, kind of miraculous powers. So that is, of course, he understands that that is not the main purpose for realizing emptiness, but still his question is, why not manifest? It's a sign for having attained a certain level, so why not be more public about it? Okay. Alan Wallace lang in the Tony thoughts of Jedela, and you Suzu Jedela, young Nuba Dominiki, then our Moshe Zutela sort of the Nuba Dominic Geon. That in the Yina, that you could mute thoughts, you Tony by a mute thought and a Moshe Zutela sort, yeah, be my Kohaku. Yina young, Kashi was on Domicho. Then I meet you don't show my daughter, the Nuba do Yuna, the Suzu Kaka, which sounds your borders. The Kashi, Pendo Dojinza. Pendo Yilamada Mila Sheshanaya, Kasim Mutu.
Sidan Tony to Savicilla, Mushi to Julie, Tony Tona Mushi to Julie, the Pendo Yoremato, Tony Tony, any Shadakichem was Mushi to Julie Stinimare.
So actually, Geshe says, with respect to clairvoyance and kind of miraculous abilities, well, they help us to understand emptiness. But it's not that once you realize emptiness, you necessarily have clairvoyance and miraculous powers. So actually, you attain these special abilities such as miraculous powers, clairvoyance, and so forth, through doing shamatha, through the practice of shamatha, you develop those abilities. And sometimes people, through the power of karma, like karma that was created in the past, so due to that, some people naturally, without having to now meditate on shamatha, for instance, have natural abilities. They're born with those. So in terms of, for instance, the clairvoyance, the different types, so one clairvoyance of knowing another person's mind, the karmic cause for that would be, for instance, if in this lifetime you're very careful about not hurting another person, not insulting them, if you're very careful about not hurting the other person's feeling with your own words, if you engage in that kind of activity, then as a result of that, in the next life, you may have some special clairvoyant abilities, such as being able to read another person's mind or being aware of their thoughts. Likewise, there are other kinds of clairvoyances, which again, or other types of karmic actions, which can result in those clairvoyant abilities. And then with regard to the main purpose of meditating on emptiness, as you will know, it is mainly to remove afflictions, remove anger and so forth, these different types of afflictions, together with their imprints. That's the main purpose for realizing emptiness. So with regard to these different abilities, such as clairvoyance, miraculous powers, so here a lot of masters have talked about this, that showing this to others is not recommended. One should refrain from openly kind of display these different abilities. But sometimes it is encouraged, in terms of being beneficial, it is encouraged that you do display them. So it relates to how beneficial you can be to another person, how beneficial it is for someone. Well, nowadays, for instance, a lot of people, when they hear about scientists, basically they have faith in scientists because they perceive scientists to have some miraculous powers in terms of what they can produce, what they can achieve. So in terms of their knowledge, there's a sense that scientists have these clairvoyant abilities. So whatever a scientist says, they believe in that. So it's not saying that this is the correct way to do this, but nonetheless, that's what it's like. So similarly here, in some cases, if someone has miraculous powers, can display those miraculous powers, has clairvoyance, it will help people when they teach something. Other people have a stronger belief or more faith in what they say. So then when they teach the Dharma, there are people following them and actually believing what they say.
되지 않은 타마들 처럼 되어가 그 파지 주지 아니 되어지는 데 대체 버렸어. 나도 아니 자지지르셨어. 자지지가 다와지기 사제를 고베데 뭐 요거라디. 다와지기 사제를 너도 요말 다른 자지지죠. 선생님이 되어 주시었어. 다른 자지지셔서 가라. 되고다. 선생님 쇼는 되어 되시었어.
그다지 너무 좋지요라. 그런 머리
부모디
좋지요라.
부모디 집을 벌려라. 제사다 부모디 기부매 인자 할신이래도 가르쳐 주셔서 주면도스. 그래서 파주는 외기 남아도서 그 대배요 말와. 다 보면 뭐 좀네. 아니 계란이 되면 간지 고고도 시고 비싸. 아니 산제다 근데 고고도. 에 맞을 때 내시 쇼그레스 케레와. 케레는 다지지셔스. 다지지야 가면서 다와지 그냥 인생 쇼그레스. 그게 너다 이거 말이 지난주 때린 건다. 갈라서는 다지지다. 내 선임이 되는 쇼고스라.
So there's a story, Geshe says, he doesn't need to go into all the details of the story, but it's basically at the time of the Buddha had like a sponsor, a specific sponsor who sponsored the Buddha. And so this girl, so he had a daughter, this particular sponsor had a daughter who was asked to go to a different country where there were a lot of Jains, like a lot of practitioners of the Jain religion. And so previously they had asked the Buddha whether it was okay for her to go there, and that was all right. So she basically went to this other place to be the bride to marry someone there. But she wasn't very happy there because she didn't have anyone to make offerings to. So there was no one there to make offerings towards. And so therefore he was quite unhappy in that place. And therefore the Buddha was approached in terms of the Buddha being invited to that place where all the Jains lived so that she could make offerings to the Buddha. And so they said that the Buddha would go there and basically give her the opportunity to make offerings.
어제 도시네 때문에 소화다 되지 니좀이 체네 다 파트로스 다 파트 초진에 더지 사실을 다른 남산 쪽으로 지리 있는 좀도 줘요 말이야 초진에 다른 주주들 바이나 간도 유스 다 주지 있는 상황에서 주진 된셔스 디카나요.
So basically it would take a month to go for the Buddha to go to this other place. It would have taken a month. So this being very difficult to go there, the Buddha therefore said, now it's okay to kind of display your miraculous powers of being able to go there simultaneously. So for other people to become an object of offerings to go there. So the Buddha basically said it's okay to display that ability so that you can get there instantaneously without having to walk for a whole month. So therefore these so actually not just the Buddha himself but also other beings like Shravakas and so forth, so followers of the Buddha, they all went to this place, but they used this miraculous power, this ability to arrive there instantaneously. And as a result of that, they all got there, and so the teachings of the Buddha spread widely in that area because they got there and basically spread the Dharma. So also another story there of like the monks at the time of the Buddha, they would go around and do alms rounds, kind of asking for food, etc. So some people said it was really bad that these monks were begging, but they didn't have anything to show, so no special powers to display, and then they would just go around and beg for food. So they criticized the monks for doing that. So someone challenged the monks, kind of saying, well, they put this, there was like a kind of a pillar, a really high pillar, and on top of that they put like a begging bowl. And then someone challenged the monks and said, well, if you want us to give fruit, then you should be able, through your miraculous ability, to bring down this begging bowl. Otherwise, just go away. We will not give you anything. And at that time, the monks didn't react at all. They were very patient. So without reacting, they just left. So then these people, they would criticize the monks. They started criticizing the Buddha. They started criticizing the followers of the Buddha. And it was very difficult for these monks to bear this kind of criticism. So the monks couldn't bear it, and one of the monks actually did display like a miraculous, this miraculous power by retrieving this ounce bowl, and basically they then went back. So the general public was very impressed by this, and they generated faith. And so this monk who had displayed this then returned back to where all the other monks were.
Sorry, so why you don't do more in modern days, at least to inspire more people in the West?
So Geshe will get to this. He's in the process of explaining you. So at that time, actually, when this monk who had displayed these miraculous powers returned, the Buddha scolded him. He said at that time it was not appropriate that you displayed that special ability. The reason being, if you do this, if you display these miraculous power, the people will have faith in the person, but they will not have faith in the Dharma. So basically what the Buddha said, the reasoning he gave was, our main goal is to remove other beings' suffering, in the sense that we teach them the Dharma, we teach them about how to think about the Dharma in the proper way, how to deal with the different afflictive emotions, etc. Our goal is not basically, our goal is to show them that our perception of reality is wrong, and instead to show them what reality is like, to basically set forth reality so that they can adjust their behavior and can remove their afflictions, and in that way remove their suffering. So our main task is not to display special abilities, special miraculous powers. So, therefore, there in a lot of places, in a lot of countries, people have great faith in the Dharma, but they're not interested in learning about the Dharma. They just have faith in the Dharma. They have faith in these lamas who display, or beings who have these special abilities of clairvoyance, etc. But they're not really interested to learn more about the Dharma. They're not really interested in what is said when it says that we are our own protector, we are our own enemy. So they're not really interested in those lines to learn more about the Dharma, what it's all about, but rather they follow those beings who can display these special abilities. That should be.
Thank you very much.
No.
You said the focus should be the Dharma and not the person.
Yeah.
So how come building statues of the Buddha, big statues, is not idealizing the Buddha instead of putting the focus on the Dharma?
인생이 쪼소서 상다에 다시 미라도 쪼서는 마다체 미빠져서 쪼 미디마인다체 저거라나 미빠져워 대다리기나야 꾸 전부도 쉬우시다 공부했다면서 저도 죽고 샤야란도 저가 김진 쪼 가게다 단다 추어랑 간단히 저는 추어디 쪼라고 인다 고시랑 김진 가게
이제 다 이기 따뜻하게 뜻을 잡을 당고 내 당고 된지 있나요? 꾸디 휴진시 이거라 가져 저디 최체 이내 최디 진소다에다 최디 바기 다바르시 디제 투에다 된지래요 쿠리우다 구승도대다 디즈유나 센테스 최디 주게자보다 최디 주게기 쿠리우지 준두고 다디.
So yes, actually, in terms of these statues, for instance, in actuality, of course, it is the Dharma that is most important and not the person. But it's basically initially to inspire a person to have these statues. So basically the ones who induce the Dharma, these beings, to kind of inspire people who first encounter those. So they're representation of the body, speech, and mind of the Buddha. And so it's really just to kind of create this Dharma environment to calm the mind, to inspire the mind, and then thereafter to, of course, then teach the Dharma.
더 그런 자신부지에디요 무시 주의 된지 토는 자신부지는 더 싫어 케요 된지만 이거지 쿠란기 최디 희애기 최디 위다 보지다 편도 여보지 된지 있으면은 여비 토네 디나 꾸디 통화다 가랑기 꾸디 치도 여보다 통화다 가랑기 셈은 디 휴긴시 테고.
So basically, we're not saying that these statues, these images are precious because the beings that they represent have clairvoyance or special abilities, but it's rather what they represent in terms of what they teach. Because they teach the Dharma, it's their knowledge, it's their insight into the Dharma, and then thereafter their teaching of the Dharma. This is meant to inspire us, to basically, inspire us in the sense of when we see this statue, we then associate it with the teachings that they have given. So how this is beneficial to our own mind, how we should apply this, think about these ideas, etc. So when we see these statues, we're inspired in that way, reminded of the teachings. This is psychology. This is the method of so this is just psychology. This is just how the mind works. So in Geshe's own case, Geshe is quite sick, so he cannot spend a lot of time reading the scriptures. So when he has the books all around him, lying around him, then he wants to start reading, he picks up a book, he starts reading, and then he starts getting sick. So then, because of that, he sometimes takes all his books, he kind of puts them together and locks them away. And then, because he's no longer looking at them, he's no longer paying attention to them, he forgets. He forgets what he studied before, what is in those books. So Geshe knows from his own experience, even if you can't read all these books, to just put them all around you. And then you see them, you keep seeing them, and that has an effect on your mind such that you won't as easily forget. You won't forget as easily. So Geshe says that's his own experience. So for instance, Geshe has given the example in some countries when, for instance, people who follow another religion destroy another religion, like Buddhism, for instance. When they destroy Buddhism, they destroy all the statues, they destroy all the representations, anything that represents the teaching, because they know the psychology, they know how we think. Because if those statues are left behind, if they're still there, there'll be a resistance towards letting go of that religion. So they actually know if they destroy any representation of the Dharma, then people will find it easier to let go. So they really know this, and out of that understanding, they destroy any representation of, for instance, Buddha.
Tati mahimbe ta kuti shambata, kuti tombata, kuti luchiwa piwa zemji, ane soram sache, ane susur pendo shibu yuwachi, ane sungu yore. Tati yohede gyunzen pa tse che zhuna, ta kuti sine, kuti gangi yinbi, gangsadi, ta jamningji koba tarshine da, ane yumala subi jun tamche dahe da, zawa dili tu digi yuwachi. Ine di jishi chazan biche ne, yuzi tongtong na yungumida. Ma di 이체 가보지네 이 이체를 너무 보고서 김진 디체를 사실 구체화된지 손없이 요새 간제살이 어디 하면 너무 보고서.
So actually it is explained that when you have a representation, an image of a Buddha, for instance, so by creating an image of a Buddha, by perceiving this image, or by making offerings towards this image, it is said that you create a lot of positive potential, as it's called, like merit, like a lot of positive potential. And why? Because what this statue represents is a person who has generated great love and compassion for other sentient beings, and has found a way to remove afflictive emotions. But Geshe says, the reason that therefore you accumulate a lot of merit by making offerings, etc., this has taken Geshe many years to figure out why. So initially Geshe found it difficult to have faith in that. How could that be beneficial? And so Genla investigated and analyzed and examined this for many years until he gained an understanding of why that is so beneficial. So it's actually difficult, I forgot to also mention that before, that this is actually difficult to, in this short time we have here together, to give you the reason for that. So that is difficult to prove, but basically it comes down to compassion. It comes down to the force of compassion that this is the case. In the back, yes?
I have an 11-year-old daughter.
Yes?
And I love her very much ever since she was born, even when she's bad.
Even when she's bad, okay.
Yeah. And, you know, I hope that I will outlive her, right?
Okay.
So that I will die before her, hopefully in a long time, who knows. Now, Buddhism teaches all things are impermanent, and happiness comes from within and not from external things. But why can't my daughter bring me permanent happiness from outside of me?
Okay. I'm sorry, should I repeat the question? Oh yes, sorry. Okay, so make sure also I understood you correctly. So he's saying that he has an 11-year-old daughter who he loves very much, even when she's bad. And so he hopes that that his daughter outlives him, that his daughter will live longer than himself. And in Buddhism it says that happiness doesn't come from outside, it comes from within. And so his question is, why can his daughter not give him lasting happiness, true happiness?
Also impermanence.
Oh, impermanence.
That nothing is, so that everything is impermanent.
Everything is impermanent, yes.
But that, for me, that could be everlasting until I die.
That could be for you everlasting?
Yeah, that happiness could be permanent.
Oh, so you're saying that why could your daughter not give you lasting happiness that will last?
Yeah, so there's two things. There's the happiness from outside,
yes.
And there's the permanent nature of the happiness.
Of the happiness. So your question is, why can your daughter not give you lasting, permanent happiness?
Yeah.
Is that clear? 아니 코라로와 가리기하르스나다 나무추 시시시는데 뒤지 던집니다 바래 이나야 코라로와 가리기하르스나 뭐 코레 밑에 규리나 돼다 코란 예라시 보는 제라시 나로와 디지요 아니 나무추라야 가르스나 나무추 시시는 가르스면서나 다 먼저 치료비 뭐고든서 먼저가 대화 대통만 대화 문에 먼저가 대통만 대화 문에 디나는 이거야 다디 근생 가르스 코란기 부모디 오랑기 땡도네 대화 데모토야 되긴 생각해. 다 대화즈나다 그 소디는 다 대화 정도 맛에 콜라 대화 대토에 부모님 콜라 대화 문제지나다 부모님 가지고 부모님이 콜라 대화 가시는 데 부모 말이 아니 대화 정도 맛에 땡든 대화디 다 부모들은 되면 땡든 대화 가시는 데 부모 말 대화 그러다 유아마도 얘기 대화 다지 되는 이야기 그러다 딱히 대화로 몰라야 될
다제 대화 문에 대한 논의 주고를 가르치는데 실현에 아니면 가르쳐 가서도 다 공부되는 거예요. 가르쳐.
갑자기 안디 대화디가 무슨 내야다 그래서 뒷냐마저 얘기 대화디 가르치는
부모들이 가려고 그랬다. 부모들의 미세기 제어시도 하고 다 제어디 부모들한테 생각을 끼우면서 가르치는
So you seem to have special love for your girl. Why for her and not someone else?
Because you know, when we do these, I just did the Tushita Introduction to Buddhism course,
Okay.
and when we do these visualizations and meditation of someone that you respect because of their actions, their values, so you think of someone older, like the Dalai Lama or something. I actually use my daughter in that meditation because the way she acts, she's very compassionate and she's wise beyond her years and she's kind and intelligent.
I'll repeat the question. So in response to Geshe-la's question, why he has love for his daughter, he said that he's doing this Tushita course, and in this course, one of the meditations, one of the techniques that he's been introduced to, is to think of an older person, of a wiser person, like His Holiness the Dalai Lama, and then to generate respect for.
But they said no, you could choose any person.
You could choose anyone, like the Dalai Lama. So not it could be the Dalai or someone else. Like could be His Holiness or someone else. And you are not choosing His Holiness. You're choosing your own daughter because she's very compassionate. She's wise beyond her years, and she's very kind. Is that right?
Yeah, I think the Dalai Lama is a bit of a red herring in this context. Not that he is the red herring, but
Not that you're wise.
yeah. But yeah.
So 제가 여기 인생 가르치는데 단단 부추시대라 이제 남주 모두 장대에다가 남주 모두기 코스들이 되대요. 아니 다 그저 몸냠낸시야다가 몸 갸담질라 다 칼로 담미박 본고 미박 가리 경고 있으나 소소 미라 슈지 미 칼로다 연된 시고 유비지라 내가 상당고 소소 구샵게 하겠지도 미 연된 시고 유비지라 상당고 빼나 자신을 경험시도 다 그런 여러분들은 우리가 상담하다 같이 그런 분명히 부분을 상담. 그래서 그런 부모들 그 직할로 다 민지 쉬워요. 아니 지나다 뭐 준셔래.
민지였어. 뭐
그런 부모 그런 부모들이 조직이 부모들 그런 민지 쉬워요. 그런 생각다 그런 게 생각은 민지 쉬워요. 대상도 마세요. 거짓과 쉬워요. 직도 쉬워요. 그럼 진짜 뭐 준셔 맞아요. 맞아. 얘네야 셔라다 직도 쉬워요. 다 민지 뒤에는 그런 부모를 상담. 여러분씨가 삼노마다 해야 돼. 또 스칼레카고 그러지도 그래서 연전 할래야 또 여러분이자 대인이야 다도 그런 부분 떠올라서
진짜 보고는 연된 뒤열에서 상담과 디지털에 제어 제조도 되지 말아. 그래서 단단히 제어. 제어 등에만 이게 마시다 되거든요. 지고 들어와. 제어 등에만 요래. 그 중중기 되는 요래. 조진에 디다 지고 지가 있는 게 보신다지 제와 유대행에 아니 이거 유대행 진짜지 키워나 딜레이야 보고티나 신가부지도 말. 진짜 굉장히 되어야지 말.
So Geshe is saying that cannot be the main reason. Why? Because you loved your daughter even when she was very little, when she did not display those qualities, when she was not very compassionate or when she was not that wise yet. And also on top of that, Geshe is saying there are other children who may be equally wise, may be equally compassionate, but when you encounter those children, you don't have the same love for them, which is why Geshe is arguing that there must be another reason, because otherwise you would also have love for these other children in the same way.
다 같이 돌드나 아니 다 무슨 문제와 내들이야 아니 가부치에 로치 당신은 가부치에 들라가 되샤 세지요래 뒤에 가부치에래 양 되샤 마힘비 엔제와치요래 뒤에 가부치에래 다 디니 남로네 되샤 이닝기 아니 가부치에디 디 괜시고를 미모레스 동해 징그레스 되샤 마힘기 제와디 다 디비주시고를.
In short, Geshe says that when we say we love someone, we have love for another person, well, it means actually we like this other person. But there are two different ways in which we can like a person. We can like them out of attachment, and we can like them out of love that is not based on attachment. So here, when we talk about the kind of attachment the kind of liking for others that we should remove, it is the one that comes out of attachment. That is the one that creates problems. That's the one that creates our difficulties, our sufferings. So that's the one we need to remove. We're not trying to remove the other type, which is not mixed with attachment.
제산도 모델을 가고 여기 인상 아니 가고 여기 중세 다가란 게 있겠기 아니 모델을 강에 채우는데 심하게 주치무대입니다.
So because you like your girl, because you love her, so when she experiences problems, you'll be unhappy.
모델을 강에 주는 제 미시버지나 아니 결혼이다. 가서다 기부 때는 좀 기부도 되버려.
So when she doesn't experience any problems, if you were not to experience any difficulties, as a result of that, you would be very happy. You would have experienced happiness.
사버드야 보면 교화친지 분명히 수뇌배제야 되고 정말이나 뭐하거나 미신다기 내배제로 내장 셈을 강에 채워야 돼.
In particular, if in the future, if instead of another person, if your girl were to harm you, the pain will be greater in comparison to someone else harming you.
이제 많이 버지니 보면 란기 톤에 대화시 제가 차샤네 애긴 신다기 톤에 강에 못 채워 봐.
So on top of that, if you give your 수수부모는 대화ina 겐신기.
그 톤에 다 대화시 제야 번주르 톤에 내나서 그 톤에 치료 있긴 신다기 톤에 강에 못 채워.
So on top of that, if you give happiness to your girl, that will lead to other problems in terms of financial, material, and so forth. Other problems. It will kind of lead to other problems.
제산 남배숑의 시에디 치료 있긴기 대화 용무 말에 계제디 시고 말에 용기 요하데 치료 디비킨디 치료를 채워 있나 다 강에 쓰레디 긴 탑시디 치료를 하는 채워 있나 셉 차예요 디제는 조회피니요 말에 스키지디죠.
So therefore, from a Buddhist point of view, it's not true that you cannot have happiness, that you cannot be happy because of external circumstances. But what Geshe is saying is that if you only rely on external circumstances, or if you only rely on the external, there is no end to it. What you need this, you need that, and so forth. So that can never give you full happiness, just that external kind of circumstance.
치료 있긴 거리체 맞춰도 뛰어내리 톤에 수수상로 당당치기 톤에 안디지요지 소토바이나 치료 있긴 주용다기 미기부 용에 있긴 체내 기부여가 아자자 밀레 강에 용에 있긴 체비가래 수수 셈시들 네트웨지 그래서
So basically, what you're trying to do in terms of Buddhist practice, what you're trying to achieve here, is to find internal happiness, happiness that does not depend on external factors. And then if external factors are conducive and you're happy, well, you can just enjoy that you already have a happy kind of state. And then when problems arise, difficulties, external problems and difficulties arise, you'll still be able to keep your peace of mind. You'll still be able to be happy. Your happiness will not be disturbed because of that inner happiness.
디 다시 제는 제요. 그래서는 세마집이 깨는 조 치료도 말해. 조디스 상로래. 디 모체는 다시 제는 요해요.
So there is a means to work towards this. So there are these methods that you can actually find such a state. Because when we talk about suffering and problems, they're actually created by our own mind. So when you recognize that, you can adjust, you can kind of transform your mind so that you do no longer perceive these things as something disturbing, etc.
Isn't it easier for monks to not get attached since they don't get married, they don't have kids, which usually are the hardest to practice non-attachment? And how would it be actually for the monks get opportunity to get married and have kids?
opportunity. So if they disrobed and were to get married, etc., right?
Maybe they will change.
Maybe, okay. Let me repeat your question to make sure I understand it so everyone can hear it. So you're saying that for a person who has family and who has kids, etc., it is difficult actually to overcome attachment versus a monk or a nun, for instance, because they don't have a family, they don't have kids. But if they were to get married, if they were to have kids, does that mean that they then also again generate attachment? Is that what you're saying? Yeah. Daina kede ta ani du kede chance yawa ina ta jik tawa lo ani lo jik tewa ina pugu do yawa ina yang rangja jik karo chapa shuk chum king mara bes. Are you kind of saying like sorry? Are you actually saying that if they were to disrobe, basically no longer be a monk or nun, would attachment after they've lived as a monk or a nun, would attachment again arise strongly? Is that your question?
Tadi benata Java Chenrezig any over the Yana complain about the digital Kuryu Chibolo, Kuryu Chibolo, we change that to the Chuma with the Yossi.
So when you talk about an ordained person, such as a monk, for instance, so basically whether they live in some remote area, they in a kind of on their own somewhere, or they live in a monastery, basically when they become ordained, they're just changing the environment in which they live, and therefore it's possible that due to the different environment, their attachment may be reduced. So if you only hope for your afflictions to be reduced because of the environment you live in, well then at some point, if you leave that kind of environment, there is danger that these afflictions actually grow stronger as they would otherwise if you hadn't lived in that kind of environment. So therefore, changing the environment you live in is only initially for like someone who's a beginner. That can be helpful initially, but that's not a long-term solution.
So the Sunday time, Sherab Kuchi, Sunday time, the Trevor Samima, Yana Yadu, Quanchi, Tenjiki Tone, and Kuato, Chumbaina, and Kenchi, the Negosui.
So mainly the main activity that one needs to engage in is to apply one's own wisdom, one's own intelligence, and just to think about different points, not just study, not just listen to the Dharma, but to think about it and to meditate on it, so that then eventually when certain circumstances arise, one will not be affected by them.
The Benadas Mimambuji Semaji Yungo, Tila Charlie, Tijesheva Inara, Numbatina Lola, and Robota, the Kuru Kimbe, and Kamiji Chuni, the Semaji Shuchana, Negapchi Semaji Shuchana, Tila Susamata, Samatan Tum, the Nega Kuru Chana Shuro, Numbashanda Chilchin, Robadi, and Koram, making the Ajaja, Dita Teloy Yogi, and Robot Zichin never check. The Chana Chivolo, Negapchi.
So for instance, if you are in a place where you're very unhappy, so you're in a particular environment where you're very unhappy because of the people around you, that everything affects you, then you may, if you can't deal with it, you may just want to leave that place. It may be temporarily a good solution to just leave it all behind, not just the people who harm you directly, but also everyone else who's connected to that. It may be beneficial to basically change the environment and go somewhere totally different to be able to deal with it.
In a Tesamina, Chemal Bodhisattva, the Midatonia,
But just that is not enough, because if then later on you return to that place, all your emotions, all your problems will rise again.
di ta junju ni so ya na zu bi to ni samlo ta ne ni sing ni bodi chimba ina ani phali di jane ni ka nge di kien chen ne ka nge me ta de sam le ba ma se sabor de ta nge la ka ni chi kien ta ran ki kien chi ni sem le ka ki chi yu gu.
So therefore, it is important to understand that this is only the initial stage. That if you're so overwhelmed by these emotions that arise, you may temporarily kind of change the environment to not be exposed to these factors that trouble you. But then thereafter, you need to make an effort such that you take, for instance, the advice that is given by Shantideva in the Bodhisattva or the Bodhisattva way of life. So think about these different points. So that to such a degree that your attitude is changed, that your attitude is transformed, so that you can now deal with these issues. You can be exposed to those problems, and even when you meet the people who previously harmed you, instead of being unhappy when you meet them, you may actually react with like be happy to see them because of your transformed state of mind.
Di mena di kisi kange di che mena ma no chi di chang ma ta dai de de la ma ta di ne di tisha se ne che ma kin di che di se ne ta de pe por so lo sa di yu mo shi ma.
So again, as few acquaintances like lay people, for instance, who initially they suffered from the fact, for instance, that they can't have children, and then they start learning about the Dharma and study the Dharma, they have some liking for the Dharma, and at some point they realize it's okay that I don't have children, because that, on the other hand, gives me the opportunity to study the Dharma. And at some point it goes so far in that they come to a point where they feel, oh, it's good like that, see the advantage of the situation, and actually be happy about something that previously upset them, kind of see the benefit of that. So again, says he has some acquaintances where they could just switch it around such that it's no longer a problem, but a cause for happiness.
So this question is pretty important to me. So I understand that the lineage of Bhikshunis or Kolias in Buddhism.
Can you slow down and speak up a little?
Yeah, so this question is pretty important to me. I understand that the lineage of Tibetan Bhikshunis was lost due to environmental and cultural reasons. Is there a chance that it will be restored? And what advice do you have for a young Westerner who views that as like a discouraging fact?
그거는 지워지 그거는 믹스해질라 개중도 그래서 가서 거기다 게놈의 동균이기 진념세야지 뭐 하고 주 아니 다 디체네 디콜라게나 깔롭나야나 지디란 제네 지디나 지깔롭나야나 아니 so the second part is like about for you to encourage you. Oh sorry, about the I will repeat the question. I forgot. Say again, please. The last part.
What advice would you have for a young Westerner who views that as discouraging or not quality?
Okay. 그런 생각을 이놈의 동규매가 인상 즉 생주도 차야 되시도 아니 자직 콜로션준도 임발라직 디톤의 양게나 깔롭나야도 이나다 고셈좀 맞아야나 그 이놈의 동규매가 이나야 다동지가 소소 다 남주지 공남는 지야서 아니 당연히 이게 좋은데 So I'm sorry, I forgot to ask the question or to repeat it. Her question is, it's something personally very important to her. She's aware that the tradition of the bhikkhuni, the bhikkhuni tradition has been lost in the Tibetan tradition due to certain circumstances. And so as a young person herself, she's asking Geshe to give some advice with regard to how to still deal with this, so to still continue with the Dharma, but not be discouraged by the fact that this tradition has been lost. Is that correct? So Geshe doesn't really have anything special to say about that, but actually it is like, as Buddha has said, that in terms of the ethical discipline, for some this becomes a cause of happiness, for some that becomes a cause of suffering. So for some, if they take the monastic vows, it becomes a cause for happiness. For others, if they take monastic vows, it actually leads to them to be unhappy and to suffer.
Any kilometer about the Bashibu Yoba in a kilometer machine to go in Jimmy Rangi, Cubatin Shubureki Yomara.
And if someone has the wish to become a bhikkhuni, to become a fully ordained nun, well, you don't need to become a fully ordained nun in the Tibetan tradition. There are other traditions where that kind of lineage is still existent, so you could take vows in another tradition.
So soon took another so long down to moment on by Kanga and the Chenrezig Tonglen Palsang. And Chenrezig Tonglen Palsang, the Kanga and Magi Tonglen in the Yore, to the shoes, somebody
So basically, if you can keep those vows as like a bhikkhuni or as a bhikkhu, if someone can keep those vows, that's wonderful. But they're not just the vows of like the monk and nun, like the ordained vows, but you also have above those, you have the vows of a Bodhisattva, you have the Bodhisattva vow, and even higher than that, you have the tantric vow. So if you can take those and if you can keep this, this is something very beneficial.
That Tomba Karsivare so the Tomba Sung, that Kadijine, Sodragi Tomba Kiloma Kisui Karine, Tomba Sung Situta, Kulon the Chip, Sembia, Numonke Machubache, Chenshete, Katuine, Numonke Machubache, Tonante, Numonke, but a Ted Nibuche, Tedici, and Chik, we said, Digi Duzane, and then Tomba Boya, not Chenshete, the Mana Chadra, Kalekava Yordi, and Chensheki Chundra, Mana Chagua.
So with regard to keeping those vows, keeping different types of vows, so the vows described as pratimoksha vows, so a monk or a nun's vows, novice or gelom and bhikkhu vows, all these different vows are called pratimoksha vows. So being able to keep those, well, in order to keep them purely, you need mindfulness and introspection. In the sense that you try to keep those vows, so you apply those two states of mind, of mindfulness and introspection, and then when an affliction arises, when an afflictive emotion arises, you apply the antidote and make sure that these will not overwhelm you. So to apply the antidote and to weaken or stop them. So this would be the way to do this. And then of course with the other vows, it's the same. So the more vows you have, it's actually beneficial if you really try to keep them in terms of keeping you attentive, keeping you mindful, and keeping you able to apply mindfulness and introspection in a very effective way.
Jizanta Sodogi Tambeka, the Numon Kate Chan, Numoma Ken, the Tunde, Tezambra. That's just a bit of work on Leon, this and Shinjenda Majili, some of our gach, Ramchibugi, some Samarka, Hari Cheshava in a summer, Dichena, Shen, Tijin Pengus, didn't Jenny Chegoreti, that she would demonstrate that. Onesungina.
So with regard to the pratimoksha vows, their main purpose is to deal with the afflictive emotions. So basically to face the afflictive emotions, to reduce them, to apply the antidotes. But with regard to the category of vows called the Bodhisattva vow, well, in that case, what you're trying to refrain from is the attitude that cherish yourself. So you want to kind of stop or seize any kind of activity that stands in the way to cherishing others more than yourself. So to dedicate yourself to other sentient beings. And that is much more difficult. So it requires a lot, like the strength of your mindfulness, the strength of your introspection needs to be much stronger. It needs to be much more, it needs to be much greater. So if you can take the nuns, the bhikkhuni vows, that'd be great. But if you feel like you cannot take them, you cannot keep them, well, it's not that you have no other options. There's other things you can do. So actually it says in general that it's very precious to be a bhikkhu or bhikkhuni, a fully ordained monk or nun. It's considered to be very precious, And in the sutras, for instance, it is explained that when you have a lay person who's reached the level called the path of seeing, so someone who's realized emptiness directly, this person still needs to prostrate, that is, still needs to pay their respect towards a person, a monk or a nun, an ordained person, who's only reached a lower level. And Geshe says this is what it says, but he's not sure why. The reason why it's like that.
So I think it's possible to develop compassion,
Mm-hmm.
and I think where the difficulty really is in making it possible to have compassion for those who have really hurt you or betrayed you.
Mm-hmm.
So the question is, what does that really look like to have compassion
For those who harmed you?
Yes.
Mm-hmm. So her question is that she says it makes sense to her to develop compassion. It makes sense to her. But then she understands also that when we generate compassion, we need to generate compassion for those who've harmed us. So how would you go about that, right? Is that your question? So how would you do that? Generate compassion for those who've actually harmed you. She'll tell you a story. So it's like a kind of made-up story. It's kind of a story. So it's kind of a story that he might have made up conceptually, as in like he just had these thoughts, and he kind of made it up. Actually, Gimla says doksu kind of means made up by your own conception. So actually, usually you should tell the story first and then tell you he made it up. But now he's already told you it's made up.
So the
story goes that Geshe, one day he walked somewhere and he met this Bodhisattva. And this Bodhisattva was insulted by another person who was harming this Bodhisattva, but the Bodhisattva was not at all disturbed by the harm inflicted on this Bodhisattva. So Geshe, when he saw that, he said he was so amazed that not only did this Bodhisattva, upon being harmed, not only did he not retaliate with his patient, but he made an effort, that Bodhisattva made an effort to benefit the other person. So basically Geshe told this Bodhisattva, this is amazing, this is truly amazing that not only are you patient in the face of all that harm and abuse, on top of that you're able to benefit the other person. So in response to that, the Bodhisattva says, there's nothing to be amazed about. I'm amazed about you. The Bodhisattva said to Geshe. So Geshe was like, oh, why is he so amazed about me? A Bodhisattva is amazed about me. So Geshe was amazed that the Bodhisattva was amazed at him. Why are you amazed with me? So Geshe was saying, in response to that, the Bodhisattva said to Geshe, well, actually this other person who's harming me, that's just a tiny harm. That's nothing, that's insignificant. So it's very easy for me to be patient with that. But you, pointing at Geshe-la, you have this inner enemy, this harm. You are harmed by your own desire, by your own anger, and you're patient with that. You're patient with that, and you're not trying anything about it. This is amazing. So Geshe-la said, well, actually the other person harmed you. So you were harmed by this other person and you're patient with them. So I'm not harmed by those afflictions. I'm not being harmed by them. So I'm not in the same situation. So then the Bodhisattva asked Geshe-la, how do those afflictions benefit you? So there are many different explanations you can give in terms of how you would think that possibly they could benefit you. So basically Geshe says, like, there are some who practice the Dharma, so they're on their own, as Geshe explained before, so you live in an isolated kind of place and you generate a lot of compassion for others. But then if certain conditions arise, if someone harms you, right away you react with anger, etc. So not only do you become impatient, but also you generate arrogance and so forth. So basically Geshe says you need to take an exam kind of like, you need to be able to kind of pass an exam in terms of different situations to check how strong your compassion really is. So actually, insult and criticism can help us in the sense that they make us more humble. They kind of take down our arrogance, they reduce our arrogance. While on the other hand, if we're arrogant, that's actually a huge problem. If we're not being criticized and so forth, our arrogance may grow stronger. And so it is said that if we're arrogant, it's very difficult to generate qualities because of that arrogance. And then also, if someone criticizes us, then we will be really unhappy. We'll experience a lot of unhappiness when someone humiliates us. So basically, a state of arrogance is very harmful. A state of pride and arrogance is very harmful. So therefore, it's beneficial. Actually, if others humiliate us, if they criticize us, we don't have to meditate on the reduction of arrogance. It will be reduced through that kind of. So it can be beneficial. So Geshe says in his own case, Geshe has lived for many years in one of the great monasteries in Thubten. So in this monastery, there's a very strong, very important tradition of younger monks being respectful towards older monks. So therefore, if you reach the higher class, then all the younger kind of students, they respectful, they put down their head, they kind of express their respect for you. And so Geshe says, sometimes without knowing, you generate arrogance because of all these people paying respect to you once you reach a higher class. So without knowing, it's kind of like creeped in, that kind of arrogance has creeped in without really being aware of it. So at some point then, Geshe was in a situation where he was in a higher class, And at some point, a younger monk kind of bumped into him, like in a kind of provocative kind of way. And Geshe-la's thought was, oh, he's so arrogant. And then he realized, no, I'm arrogant. I'm the one who's arrogant. But his first thought was, oh, this monk is so arrogant, bumping into me who's from a higher class.
신의 하고서 당한 아주 친구 차이 끼는데 친구들 구셰 주디산에 되게 아마 서로 수수다지 마치 대시마데 코카리를 끼치를 오는 게 하고서.
So at that moment, Geshe realized he's the one who's got arrogance, in the sense that he had reached a higher class. The younger monks all paid respect to him, and he had not been careful in terms of applying mindfulness and introspection at the right moment. And so without him being aware of it, arrogance had arisen in his mind. So if you pay attention, when you pay attention, then you become aware how you become unmindful, how you become, your mind is no longer peaceful. So only when you pay attention, then you become aware of it fully. So then Gela started reflecting upon that for about 2 days, but his mind didn't really change. But Gela said, well, anyway, in 2 days you can't really change much. So Gela felt like, after he had analyzed it and thought about it, that the main condition, the main kind of reason for him growing so arrogant was this respect that he was getting from the younger monks. So he felt he needed to do something to remove that respect, so that the younger ones would not be respectful, because that was the main reason for his arrogance. Was one day he went into the monastery kind of restaurant where all the young monks were there. So he thought, this is the opportunity to destroy that respect for me. So he went among all these monks and he started singing an Indian song. For them to lose respect. So whether they actually thought it was bad or not, Geshe doesn't know. Usually we think, oh, I embarrassed myself, it's just in the mind. But anyway, just doing this, kind of doing something like a little bit extreme embarrassing, his mind became very calm. That sense of like arrogance was gone. He became very calm and peaceful. So anyway, and I'm saying anyhow, so other people criticizing us, humiliating us is beneficial because it reduces our arrogance. And so the problems that arise from that arrogance, they will also be reduced. And likewise, when you are abused and someone harms you, then you get to understand others in a similar situation. So you're able to generate empathy, compassion. You're able to generate compassion. And also when talking about past and future life, what happens if someone harms you in this lifetime and you're able to be patient with that kind of harm, then the kind of negativity, kind of negative potential that has been accumulated in previous life, it gets destroyed, it gets purified. It just disappears, it gets purified. So actually when you practice patience, you are actually allowing a little problem to arise, which has great benefit. So it's similar to a doctor. Like when you go to see a doctor, in order to remove a greater problem, they may inflict some pain on you, like give you an injection, etc. So in order to actually remove some greater trouble, it's similar to that.
가다니 삼도 당당 신인지기 순뇌기 되는 용도잖아요. 코로나 편도 쉬우지니 비두시 되고 편도지기 두시 되나 컨텍스트로 갖고.
So actually, if you can really think about this, the other person harming you is very beneficial. Another person harming us is very beneficial. So when we really understand that, how could we want to harm this other person who actually benefits us so greatly?
아니 가버도 돈이 도요나 베나다 인디 연구도 갈수 그래 미치기다 마카마나 데려버체 카마디나 롤라다 멤버스에 네 배사가 다 갈라고 야나면다 카마나가 디 마타고 신다 주여버체 코마가 오지사 마타고 주여버체 아니 마투바다 다 이렇게 이 독자 제수는 시시다나
So also to explain this idea from the point of view of emptiness here, to give you an example. So Geshe says, imagine there's a person who looks just like Geshe. So people mix Geshe up with this person, they get confused. So actually this person walks up to Geshe and starts abusing it, starts insulting him. But Geshe knows they're mistaken. They're mistaken. Actually, they need to talk to this other person, but just because Geshe looks like this other person, they abuse Geshe. So in that moment, because you know they don't mean you don't get upset, right?
지사 디 삼로원에 거는다 거라 충분히 비디셰드를 제바이나 삼로원에 거의 아니 갈라부터 기무시하면서 좀 해도.
So likewise, if you think when another person insults you, when another person abuses or insults you, the way they perceive a kind of self, some solid kind of self that actually doesn't exist. So the self that they perceive doesn't exist. So they're actually mistaken about that. They're mistaken when they insult you. Excuse me, in that moment. So they perceive something to be truly there, which is not truly there. And therefore you can actually come to think, you can laugh about it, about that kind of mistake. And so therefore you won't get angry.
이네 충분히 디제가 이네 쉬어요나야 쉬어요나 다 같이 와서 지 야부 따질 때나 게라 말을 지나치셔서 야부 따가.
But if they come and they want to actually hit you over the head, then you're like, oh, well, wait a minute. Really, first examine me well. First check well how big is this before you start hitting me.
그래서 동의를 오늘은 뒤에나 수디 제가 용도 얘를 기타도 하고 싶어요.
So if you really have a sense of emptiness, you should encourage the other person when they walk up to you to beat you up. Well, please examine well, check well what's actually there.
Is it beneficial to adopt our Tibetan name that we given by our root guru in our everyday practice, or everyday life?
Okay. Yes. Okay. So the question here is: would it be beneficial if you've been given a name by your root teacher, by your main teacher? You've been given a Tibetan name. Should you use this Tibetan name in your daily life? Is that right?
Yeah. Then renouncing the other one.
And to give up your other name. Susu koi lama susu la min sabat o na waina, min sabat na waina. Da susu namgyung gi min jira. Won di pasha ne susu min sabat gi kushi ne pendu doe.
지속이 계지셰가 있나 이 팬더메리 강사 참상을 안에 강에 체험 모습이 카네디라 파스포르타 상관은 무엇이든지 상상을 요구할 수 있기.
So actually, this can, when you live in society, can lead to a lot of problems in the sense that you show your passport, there's a different name in there, it's very confusing. It could just create more problems, more difficulties.
그 중이나 이 계층부지 그게 갈라올 때기라고는 신경을 고려 차단시 볼로에게 치도 민지볼로 두로지볼로 대사지볼로 아니 따뜻으샤 이 당고 다 차진의 계층부지가.
So, but for someone who's become ordained, who's become a monk or a nun, it's considered to be important for a beginner. So as Geshe talked about it before, in terms of you change your environment. But you don't just change your environment, you change your name, you change your haircut, you change your clothing. You make a lot of changes. So in that case, it's considered, as a beginner, it's considered to be vital or beneficial.
Hindi Pijutanji Digitoni Semangola, Shujobi Sambo, Geshe Thupten Palsang, and Mixama Pijutana, Dayan Pedojirva, Himena the Kishrioma.
So if it helps you by using this new name that you've been given, that every time you use it, you're reminded of the Dharma. If it helps you to be mindful of the Dharma, then it's okay. But if that's not the case, if there's no benefit, then why? There's no reason to change your name.
So I've participated in this Tushita introduction course, and I have a feeling it's very easy to get the impression, because it's so peaceful and spiritual, you have to think, oh, I'm very mindful, I have great mindfulness, I don't get angry with people. But when you go back to your daily life, I know plenty of things that will aggravate me. So what is his advice for trying to maintain practice?
Yine yanti koyu gittiğin için kura sözün bomtuğuz. Ko da şuma kura da jik soso payla su lodra pa lodra yanki mambu jiga jik kura lung chosho doz da lung chosho doz jik cha deyoruz. Gümzün jichene yene kalop şinaruna da jik soso kung jayadla kung jayala da sözün bomtuğuz o dikam jene ya pa kitrela pa gimoni jik yamden chela dikolan kalop şinaruna. Sorry, I forgot again to repeat the question. His question is, he's done the introduction course here in Tushita, and he knows it's because of the environment being very peaceful and being very conducive. He doesn't easily get angry, he can be patient and practice patience, but he's also aware that this is because of the environment, that once he goes back home to his own country, there'll be a lot of factors that will aggravate him, will make him angry, and so he would like Geshe to give him some advice how he can continue with this practice effectively. Is that right?
Chitane di kasigure control lamsam mayonnaise di test hago yore. Da mo tambodi goba tambodi karesna hono sasevi chin nya di esto. Di mo si person di goba yore ba. Samdai nya je ni mo ni sum shi padmele malova ine ne londa turu ba. Malova ine semati ba di meba suregi di chibu ba.
So in general, Geshe says, it's difficult, of course, to stop anger right away. It's very difficult to hope to reduce it right away. But so one of the first steps would be to make sure you don't hold a grudge. As in like, okay, you may have anger in a moment, but not to hold on to it. Forgetting about actually retaliating at some point. Not even that, but going to the extent of holding on to it. It would be important that you try not to hold on to that anger.
So that pinja down in the Pamapu, the Chowakine, the Kajit, the Control site, the video Jalian, she's a Kajit that came or disorders. Juntuna, I need a tabu.
Actually, also Geshe said something I forgot to mention before. Geshe said you get unhappy in that moment, but you should not retaliate. And then Geshe said just now, well, in our relation with other people, like sometimes we fight with our relatives, with our siblings, even like your partners, if you have a partner, you fight with them. But oftentimes you get angry with them, but right away it kind of disappears. So it would be important to kind of learn that, to be able to let go of it and not hold a grudge.
And it's very, very cool. Can tell you the Katule on a massage, you
No. So then, step by step, you will be able to not just avert holding a grudge, but also make sure that when certain circumstances arise that you won't get angry. That you can only get to that state through familiarity, through meditation, through familiarizing yourself.
Just a Tagar conversation, the Digi people soon, and the changes of Video Namata, Ripa, Kuchu, Chuji, Moboji, Dinalon, Suzuki, 너 봐봐. 다시 그때 가시 추축제 어디 쇼에 공단이 뭐 콜 콜도 내가 차이 거고 그래서 가시에는 좀더 태우라.
So for instance, if there's a person who would make you angry, if there's a certain situation, what you should do is you take the text, the Bodhisattva Way of Life by Shantideva, Bodhisattva, and in the sixth chapter, the patience, the chapter on patience, you'll find 9, 10 different kind of reasonings for why you shouldn't get angry. So you go through those reasonings and you take those that you find most effective, you kind of arrange them, take those out, and then think about this, focusing on a particular person that makes you angry. So do it in the morning, do it in the afternoon, do it in the evening. So in that way you become familiar with these reasonings and familiarize yourself with the practice of patience. And so you basically prepare yourself in the sense that when the situation arises that usually makes you angry, then in that moment mindfulness and introspection arise, which will be able to avert that anger, which will be able to stop the anger in that moment from arising. So in that way you train yourself in that practice of mindfulness and introspection. So the kind of order, the sequence here, this is based on reasoning. So the actual practice is different. This is Geshe saying personally. So in his own experience, there was a situation where it was like that. So at some point what happened, he was actually meditating on patience. He was actively meditating on patience. And then another person approached him and harmed him. And he didn't get angry. So he thought, oh, I'm really doing well, this is excellent. But then the next day he got really angry. He has a hard time to choose.
Why are the Lamas not using their miraculous powers, the Chinese, to save the people from suffering?
Lama is so to worship and zuju is a pigeon. And he Gambila, Gamila, Pap, Huna, Papia, Kashin Pigeon.
What was the question?
Oh, sorry. Yes. His question is, why do the Lamas not apply their clairvoyant and miraculous powers to drive out the Tibetans, to drive out the Chinese from Tibet? In 1959, when the Tibetans lost their freedom, at that time many of the monks stayed in a place called Baksa. So they all got together there, and among these many monks, there was one monk who contracted tuberculosis, TB, and he had to spend some time in a hospital to treat his tuberculosis. So the doctor at the time who treated this patient, who treated this monk, he had read a book about some hat, H-A-T, hat, right? About a hat that had miraculous powers, that when you have that hat, no one can defend you, you will always victory, you will always be the one who wins a battle. So basically the doctor heard about this hat that you can defeat anyone. So with this book, so in the book it said that this hat could be found in Tibet. So the doctor went up to this monk and said, look, this is what it says in this book here. Geshe says he himself doesn't believe there's such a hat. But this monk apparently believed that such a hat existed. So when the monk said, yeah, there probably is a hat like that, the doctor said, well, why didn't you wear it when the Chinese arrived? So the monk couldn't answer in that moment. What could he say? There isn't, he said, in response to that, he said, there is an answer to that. I'll tell you later. So the next day, the monk who suffered from TB, he came the next day to receive an injection. And a few hours before that, one person who suffered from tuberculosis, from TB, he had just passed away. So then he said, I'm not going to take an injection. This monk said, I don't want an injection. And the doctor told him, you should take this injection because if you don't take this injection, you may die quickly. So the monk then said to the doctor, why didn't you give an injection to the person who just died? So actually, it's just one condition. It's just one condition that may keep you alive, but that's not the only condition. So the injection may save you, but may not, because it's just one condition of many other conditions that could lead to your death. Likewise, with the situation in Tibet, the situation in Tibet is the result of many different causes and conditions. So many different causes and conditions have come together. For instance, the karma that the Tibetans have accumulated, the behavior of certain actions that the Tibetans engaged in over many generations. That all that coming together serves as a multitude of different causes and conditions. So to only apply, as a solution to that, only apply miraculous powers and clairvoyance won't be able to take care of it, because that would just be one counter condition that can go against it. So you need a lot more causes and conditions to solve that issue. So leave aside the situation in Tibet. So the Buddha himself has so many miraculous abilities, has so many clairvoyant abilities and powers, but we're still suffering. Why are we still suffering? Even though the Buddha was around, why could he not stop our suffering? But we can't say that these abilities do not have some effect. Of course, they're also effective, but they're only one condition, just one condition, in terms of so many other conditions that are needed. Also, so actually there are a lot of incidences where there are certain objects that the lamas, they bless certain objects, or you take certain scriptures that have a special blessing, that when you put on something, it's kind of like something that protects you from bullets, for instance. So there are many instances where people wore these kind of protective amulets or whatever, so wore those and were actually not harmed by bullets. So there are many stories, a lot of situations when this was actually beneficial. So this is like a special kind of miraculous kind of object. So there are a lot of stories like that. So actually, if like there's a situation, someone shoots at you, so there are these stories that the bullets didn't even come close to you because of this person wearing this protective kind of object. But of course, in that moment, you could argue, well, the other person just wasn't able to hit you correctly, right? They just missed you. But But there are a lot of stories, Gilna says, where people actually found the bullets in their clothing. They had pierced a hole in their clothing, but they didn't pierce the skin. So there's many stories, many incidences of when that happened. But there were some who had these protective objects and still died. So this is just one condition. There are many conditions that lead to a death of a So actually what's really amazing is that at the Geshe saying that at the time in 1959, what happened was some of the people fighting against the Chinese actually wore those protective objects, and then when they were surrounded by the enemy, they knew they were not going to succeed. They were outnumbered by all the Chinese surrounding them, and they decided if they catch me and I'm still alive, they're going to torture me. So they decided, I'm just going to allow myself to be killed. So they they threw away these objects that protected them, and still they were not killed. Still they were not killed by those weapons. The weapons, the bullets couldn't pierce their skin. So there's actually the story of someone called Losang Tashi, that was his Tibetan name, but he was actually a Chinese who was part of the Chinese army. But he went over to the Tibetans. He basically went over to the Tibetans, and so the Tibetans, when he kind of went over to their side, well, on one hand they thought, oh, that's great, because he can tell us about what the Chinese are planning to do, so it can be beneficial. He knows what they're planning to do. But on the other hand, they were also suspicious of him. They thought, oh, since he's a Chinese and he kind of came over to outside, he kind of joined us, but maybe he's just spy. He's just working as a spy, so they were suspicious of him. So some believed this man, but others were suspicious of him. So at some point, the Tibetan soldiers were moving together with him, and they kind of arrived in this very narrow kind of area, and the Chinese soldiers came from above, from the mountains, and started shooting at them. But they were all wearing these protective kind of objects, except for this Chinese man called Losang Tashi. So all the bullets were not able to affect them or to harm them, but not even Losang Tashi, although he wasn't wearing anything, still he did not get injured. And so this person, Losang Tashi, although he was a Chinese, he had faith in his holiness the Dalai Lama. So every morning he would do prostrations, kind of make requesting prayers, do the practice of Avalokiteshvara, the Buddha of compassion. And so the theory was that this protected him. So then the Tibetans felt like, oh yes, he is really one of us in that moment. So he actually, after Tibet then lost her freedom totally and the Tibetans all came over, he also came with the Tibetans and he stayed in Belakopi, and in the meantime he's passed away, this Chinese man.
When I'm kind of dealing with difficult people, difficult situations, I try to cultivate an understanding that the person must be acting from a place of suffering, like we talked about, and therefore cultivate compassion for that person. But along with that compassion, I find that there's a subtle condescension that arises. I just want to know how to deal with
question. So his question is with regard to his practice of compassion. So he says he tries to practice compassion. So what he does is when another person harms him, he tries to become aware of the fact that this other person is suffering, has experiencing suffering, him or herself. But in that moment, there's still a sense of resentment, you're saying? Like a sense of...
In saying that they're suffering, I feel like there's a condescension.
Oh, you condescend. So it feels like he's looking down on them, as in like being condescending, so they're suffering. So how do you overcome that sense of kind of feeling superior to that person, right? And not condescending, not be condescending with regard to thinking they're suffering. 삼자고 밀어수 뇌경이도 주나 딱군 ninje 공에 다치치기도 다치 삼로 갔다면서나 다 가주 미데래 강에 열을 동에 열었어 이나 양지기도 정말 또 지금 하게 도시기도 다치 뭐 샴네마다 해도 실라 다치 코로나직 강에 정지에 와 있다 다치 소송하게 도시기도 온티는 하게 가야 다치 가는
다 마제기도 슬라보레데 이 마제 이메요 섬타요
다시 나게 된다 레어마다이나 정말 막 다들 그만 샴네다야 소리시 그런 스타지 ninje 마직 밀어봤도 소소 강이다 오지 버리 원래 마직 이거 소리 다단지라 우디 다시 찍지어라 나게 나한테 간
다케도 안타리아 디카블야 마제제제 용쇼그레 야 마제 마이고 뽑아제제 요그레 엔페난다 삼단다 제순기요레 아니 파조티기 네버제바이나 코 카요 말에 아리 나주인나다 수도공단 신규요 말에 녹종요 말에 대지기 토라 아니 코 딘디제는다 카요 말에 이내 나 코를 저기 말에 말로 좀 뭐제 차이니 나 공조사 딘디 파는 뭐로 제되나 아니 마장에 밑에 가리요래 제산 코란디 그두기 교이 막 하고 있는데 지금 나 하고 세비 맞지 지금 했어 딘디랑 맞지 저거 뽑아 저거 디 누가 세 말이
So in that situation, so I had a hard time to find a word that is exactly right for the condescending attitude. So I used the word arrogance, but then I described you kind of look down on the other person slightly. So anyway, Vishla's response was, well, whether it is arrogance or whether it's this type of pride, you need to kind of check what is the kind of attitude you have in that moment. Because what may happen is in that moment when this person harms you, you may get a sense, oh, but they haven't studied the Dharma, they don't know about patience, didn't have the opportunity to learn about this. Well, I had this opportunity. I've had the opportunity to learn about the advantages of compassion, etc. So in that moment, it is to be seen whether this is really condescending. It's a type of pride, it's a kind of confidence that you feel, oh yeah, I've learned that, so I should therefore now be patient with this person who hasn't had the same opportunity. So again, that's not necessarily something negative.
지당기 돈의 시바이나 아니 제물을 지연여 송들이 그뒤에 초용을 있다고 그랬어요. 이게 아니 카모 뭘 편도였다.
So in general, something that His Holiness always says, or says again and again, His Holiness says it's important to look at the situation from all angles, from all sides.
그래서 코 공도 잡고다 신의 뇌경에 수수신의 뇌마치 디디기 다 타고 지에 오늘 땅에 in the
sense that it's beneficial to look at all these aspects, to think, for instance, well, yes, in this particular situation, I have more understanding of compassion, etc., whereas that person doesn't. But looking at it from a different side, this other person has qualities that I don't have. So to also become aware of the other good qualities that I may be lacking.
가도 다가는 이네 코 콘더스 수수 콘더마사 다 디찬의 수수 야가체 예 수수 마제지 코 마제 이제 디찬 코 야가체
So to think like, okay, from one point of view, if the other person gets angry with me and I'm patient, I may get a sense of arrogance. Oh, I'm better than them. But then to think, oh no, but because I have arrogance, they're better than me.
아니 지용 기찬에 아니 진짜 순대시네 신tuk자가 이봐 안 최선의 신은 상상이 이루이바 디균된도 유나 아니 통수말레다 구셔다 유비 토는 인지계지 인편도인 거.
And in general, what you should think is that no one is naturally angry. Anger is not it's not something that is natural to our mind, it's just temporary. So to think that if you even take it to a greater level, that all sentient beings, not only is it not in the nature of their mind to get angry, but they all have Buddha nature. So if you think about that, then you generate a kind of respect for all sentient beings. And out of that respect, then you act appropriately. Out of that respect, of that sense of others. So those who consider the practice of love and compassion as beneficial, they should take an exam with their teacher.
In shamatha practice, we've been practicing like having awareness of awareness. I'd be curious what awareness means to him and what advice he could give us on this practice.
First I'll repeat. So your question is, well, in shamatha, in terms of your teachings, the teachings you received, there were teachings on shamatha, on calm abiding or concentration, and you've been taught to become aware of your own awareness. So your question is therefore, what is awareness? Well, I guess I can talk about what is awareness.
Impersonally.
Yeah. Kurang ni shela kunsu shine kumya da tawala ni khalma khashiri da shine kumdu nigi ge kharasu morisna ani susu khalo ta susu sheba dela mipa chesa di sheba chabu kis ta mipa chesa di sheba ina ta sheba di din la bora sheba da ta la bora ta sheba sna lo sheba se di khande shere ta sheba la mipa do chena ta susu sheba la gomkya ta susu la mipa do chena ta sheba se di khande shere
ta gomje la shola ma to so di sheba se di khande shere di.
So is your main question with regard to not the meditation itself, but what is awareness?
Well, I guess like...
So is your question more in terms of what is the entity, what is the meaning of awareness, versus how does the awareness observe your awareness? Which one is your question? The second. Or sheba susu nipa chesa di khande des. More di kono mai kache.
Sheba koran
Koran kan sumi kache.
Shimi.
He doesn't know.
What's the shimi?
He says, I really don't know.
Yambe sheba ni shane kon nyodrasawo. Machiche ni shane nyodrasawo.
So basically it's very difficult to have two awarenesses, with one watching the other simultaneously. But then to say that they arise one after the other, that's also difficult. To say one arises earlier, then the later one observes the first one, that's also difficult. So there's actually a lot of discussion, there's a lot of debate about whether it's possible to have two conceptual minds arising at the same time, such that one can observe the other, one can focus on the other. There's a lot of debate and discussion on that, whether that's actually possible.
So just a question about bodhisattvas. So from my understanding, a bodhisattva is somebody who comes into this life and to this existence and who dedicates his life to help the others through out of compassion and wisdom. But so like people like Nelson Mandela or Gandhi come to my head. But so in that sense, you don't have to be a Buddhist, you just have to have the wish to help all sentient beings. I was reading the Bodhisattva vows, and they all make sense in terms of ethics and they help for compassion. But the first vow is that you should always go for refuge and the three jewels. So does that mean you have to be a Buddhist to be a Bodhisattva? Or it seems to be that way.
Yes. So his question is, he's heard a lot about bodhisattvas, and his understanding is that these bodhisattvas come to this world, basically when they're born, their main kind of function, or their main kind of endeavor is to benefit other sentient beings. So when he hears that, he's thinking of Nelson Mandela or Mahatma Gandhi. So his sense is, well, they probably don't have to be Buddhists, actually. They don't necessarily need to be Buddhists to be bodhisattvas. But then again, when you read the Bodhisattva vows, one of the first kind of one of the first kind of vows that you take is to take refuge in the Buddha Dhamma Sangha. So that would imply that you have to be a Buddhist to be a Bodhisattva, that is to keep your Bodhisattva vows. Condition 전주 semba세 전주 semba kola mabuji jawar. 다 전주 semba세 condition lamina 다 지금 종주 semba다 다른 종의 대내 속내야 미sem지 변치하다 미 sem지나 펜도지하기 전에 쪼다 쪼디나 그랬어. 대다 이나다 코스tamno 타나다 직 페도스 삼다나 다 세제 간디지다 넬슨 만델라 사우스 아프리카지 오든 진지지라 미 믹스도지가 콘소페시 다 전주 semba다 오레나 투 제가 무슨 남과 말해 믹스랑 남과 개요 말해 손상다 전주 semba이나 남과 인고야 개요 말해 대인의 양고 가산 장동 로디점을 전주 semba 동바 로디점을 아니는 방고지나 아니 경주치하고 그랬어 네 말을 다 추수면서 어디서 경주치고 또 대인이나요 전주 semba 이거나 경주치고는 남과 인고 그랬어 어디 간대요
저는 전주 semba 시디딜라 아니 등반이 참고 전주 등반 세지다 신된 등반 세지 참고
So actually, a bodhisattva needs to be someone who has two types of aspiration, two types of wishes, two types of aspiration. One aspiration is to benefit all sentient beings. The other aspiration is to become an enlightened Buddha. So when we talk about the aspiration to benefit others, it is basically, the attitude of benefiting others. That's the kind of attitude. So with regard to this aspiration, with this kind of attitude of wishing to benefit other sentient beings, well, you don't need to rely on any kind of Buddhist ideas to be able to do that. So, but with regard to the other attitude or the other type of aspiration, it is the aspiration to become a fully enlightened Buddha. So to have that kind of wish, to have that kind of aspiration, you need to connect it to Buddhist ideas. So usually we have a sense when a person is kind-hearted, when they benefit others, they're a bodhisattva. So there's a way of using that word, saying, oh, this person is a bodhisattva. But actually that is just a very coarse perception of who a bodhisattva is. Because in actuality, a bodhisattva means someone who has both aspirations. The aspiration to benefit all sentient beings, but also the aspiration of wanting to become a Buddha. So therefore, a bodhisattva, the idea of a bodhisattva is very profound as well as extensive and profound. So actually when we talk about having compassion for others or the wish to benefit other sentient beings, there are different levels. There's a greater level, there's a middling level, and there's a lesser kind of level. So different types of level, different kinds of levels, in the sense that, of course, it's very admirable if someone wants to benefit all human beings in this world. This is amazing. This is amazing to have that kind of attitude. But actually, when we talk about a bodhisattva, when we talk about this wish to benefit others here, it doesn't just mean for others to be happy, etc., or to benefit them, but it also includes the wish. Here we talk about great compassion, great love. So it needs to be influenced or affected by great love and great compassion in the sense that you want to remove all the suffering of samsara, all the different types of samsaric suffering. You want to remove all these different types of suffering. So when you become aware of that, that's what it really means to be a bodhisattva. It takes on a different meaning. It has like a different meaning. It goes deeper than just wanting to benefit others.
Any data changes in the region, any data which matter, changes in the yin that to matter.
If it's just the wish to benefit others, then you can say you are of the type, you have the kind of type, or you kind of, you're like, you're like of the family of Bodhisattva, you're of the type of a Bodhisattva, but you're not really a Bodhisattva. So basically what it means to be of the type of a Bodhisattva is such that this person who has that natural tendency, when they encounter the Dharma, when they start practicing the Dharma, they're more likely to move towards the Bodhisattva path versus the Shravaka or the Pratyeka Buddha path. So with regard to this mind that wishing to benefit others, which includes great compassion, great love, which includes bodhicitta. So actually when you check your own mind, you will be the one who knows whether all these types of awarenesses have arisen in your continuum. So with regard to another person, we don't know their actually mental state. So actually also there could be bodhisattvas, so in the sense of like their actual attitude, their actual behavior is that of a bodhisattva, in the sense that internally they hold the view of a bodhisattva, etc. However, in terms of the beings that they encounter, in terms of the needs of other beings, so for instance, if they live in a Christian society, now then they act according to the needs of that person. They would not try to make them convert, for instance. So they themselves hold certain views that they may not share with others, in the sense they don't teach them. They do what is most beneficial in that moment. So they don't actually show what they think, how they feel, but they do anything that is possible to benefit others, which is why you can have bodhisattvas living in other societies where the Dharma is not practiced, but they just don't talk about it. No one is aware of that.
Yeah. I heard a story about a monk that had been practicing for some time, and he had, in the story goes, he had a bunch of different experiences, divine experiences or out-of-body experiences during his meditations. And then he went to his teacher and said, hey... He went to his teacher? Mm-hmm. He went to his teacher and said, hey, I've had all these experiences. What do they mean? I think I might be enlightened, whatever. The teacher says, you're missing the point. It's not about these experiences. They're just movies on a screen. Turn your attention back to who is the knower of these experiences. That is where your liberation will come. Mm-hmm. So I was wondering if he could kind of elaborate on that and what kind of liberation you would get after realizing who's the knower of these experiences.
Do I have to repeat the question?
No.
Yes?
No.
Okay, yes. So the question is, his question is, he's heard this story about a practitioner who had been practicing for some time, and he had some experiences in his meditation. He had gained some experiences, and he went to see his teacher about them, and he shared these experiences with his teacher. He told him about those experiences, and the response by his teacher was, well, this is not that special. You should actually go back and now observe the person who has that experience, who has those experiences. So his question, therefore, is what does that actually mean in terms of what does that entail? Am I saying it right? What does that mean in terms of your spiritual practice, in terms of the goal, if you are supposed to observe the observer? Am I saying it right?
Yes.
그런 rum지 코에서 니만 냠렌지 미쿠슈슈 타코 곰냠렌지 좀 발량지 냠녀도 사 믹스시 코바도 키스레 아니코 게긴 살아자리 좀 발라 아니 게긴 슈네 하나 똑바디 디디게 오래 아니 게긴 디디 타키란 데는 똑바게 알아기 뮤조리 말스 당보 똑바 게긴 데라 데라 미바체고 그랬어 곰 양긴 데라 데라 미바체고 그랬어 뮤조리 디레스 타 그런 지워디 가르스나 가르스이다 진짜 너무 수수 미우조디 수수 공양이면 밑받쳐보나 어디 칼로 다다지 나오지 냠내지 얘기 미우조 가르쳐대 똑바기는 되다 말이야
그때 남사 코랑기 선수지 나트에 가보러 그래서 똑바기에서 똑바 간지지 제유 아니야 공경이 나오다 똑바기행이 되지 프로비 삼다가 찍찍내야 고아는 너무 보이고
Actually, it's difficult to really say what was the teacher's intention in that moment, telling him you should observe the observer. And also when he says he had some experience, he had some kind of realizations through his meditation, well, what does that actually mean? What is that kind of realization? What is the attitude? How did he meditate? How did this meditator, what was his actual intention? What was he actually thinking? So without really understanding that, it's difficult to interpret this story or to give an answer to your question.
가실을 때도 요소래 게시 코란기 다 띵이지 때부터 차이나 다 되지냐 뭐시 수주이나다 되지냐 요게나 디 유조마 다스 쇼를 깨져를 것도 유조디 미긴 나 코란기로 신신을 지어버렸어.
So someone would possibly say that the meaning here could be that this practitioner had focused on the practice of shamatha, for instance, that is on the practice of concentration, or he had mainly focused on the practice of generating clairvoyance or miraculous powers. So because of that, basically this is not the main goal of Buddhist practice. His teacher could have told him, well, most important is to understand the nature of ourselves, how we really exist. That's why he told him to go back and meditate on that, because all these other experiences that he had, they're just side effects and not what we're actually aiming for with Buddhist practice.
인생권도 마다 마신의 관계 치도 딱깔이 잡혀서 이 무게의 상황 마디 치도 신의 제내 마디 치도 대지기 자신도 지대서 마디 우연히 치도 가지지도 그걸 정신이 가지지도 다디 신의 제고에 끝나주미 딱 계셔지죠.
So basically, what is most important is to understand how this I exists, the I that we look after 24 hours a day. Day and night we're concerned with this. Day and night we're concerned for its happiness. It gives rise to all the other afflictions. It is the one that feels harmed when another person harms us, that suffers, etc. So the main goal is really, what is that I we're so concerned about. So to understand, how does it exist in reality? What is its actual nature? So this is that's the main goal of Buddhist practice, to understand that I. So can you speak up, please? How should one understand the purpose of life? How can you find, how do you determine the purpose in your life? 소스기 칼로 믹스기 칼로 소소 믹스는기 단단데 뭐 가득 차고 딱 하면서 소소 단단 How do I find the meaning in mind? It's very difficult for me to translate into Tibetan. 미스 단단데 뭐 가득 차지 좀 따다다 단단데 뭐 임바데 가득 차지 좀 소소 믹스기 미우조 das so miteinander miuzo die Karriere sieht alles falsch.
Yeah, that's it.
Is the question clear? Yeah, so how do you determine what is the meaning of your life? I said, like, what is most important in your life? I translate it as in like, what is the most important part of your life? So to translate it, what is the main goal in your life? What did that so mean? So what did
당연히 다시 주제와 수수기 다 된다니까 아니 디 아니 편도시도 건드지래 내가 건드지래 탈도 변도 건드지래 야디 때문에 건드지래 이 수수기 두투해지래 말에 이 차상한 심주지 제네 기시다 이 체도 편과 푸수 편과 수수로 고용 뭐데 디임바 이 두투해 임바 땡케나 다 디수수기 미 자로 다 된지 두투가 있나 아니 신에 다 수수기
So here you need to check, you need to examine and analyze. First of all, what do you wish yourself? What do you want? What do you want from life? What kind of aim would you set for yourself? What kind of goal would you set for yourself? And then, is that really beneficial? Is that goal really beneficial for yourself and others? What is it in terms of temporary benefit and long-term benefit? Is there long-term benefit? Is there short-term benefit? Is it something that you can actually establish? Can you actually bring this forth? Is this something you can actually realize or actualize? Is this possible? Is there a need for it or not? So really analyzing along those lines. If you come to see this is something meaningful, not just short-term, but also long-term, is beneficial for yourself and others, it's something that you can actualize, and so forth, it's something that's necessary, then you can come to the conclusion, yes, it's worthwhile. This is the meaning of my life. This is the goal of my life. And you can pursue it.
In our learnings of emptiness, we had two aspects, like one aspect of selflessness of a person, and another is selflessness of a phenomena, right? But in terms of person, the conclusion is that we have no self. That means we are inherently dependent. So
inherently dependent.
So does that mean that we have no self and we are dependent on some other super self or superpower?
All right, I'll repeat the question. So he has learned about selflessness of person and selflessness of phenomena other than person. Now his question is with regard to selflessness of person. So he has learned that the self is inherently dependent on other factors. Does that mean that there is no self and we are dependent on some super self? Super self. What is a super self? Like a universal self.
컨셉이 담에서야 된다. 디르베스 다 된다. 컨셉이 담에서야 된다. 다센디요 말스. 다세디 슈셴나 되버체. 아코란시기 셴나 되버체. 아니 란시는 셴나 되는 다 된저 셴세야디 치 던진기 다다 그러베. 다지다다 치 던진기 뭐지고다 치 던진. 치 던진은 제가 얘기하는 치 던진. 다디기다. 치 던진 지금 탐지가 잡았다 소리시다. 탐지를 잡았다. 어디가 들어오래? 그 주변에까지는 수수기 다디 매나야. 탐지를 잡았다 소리지. 탐지를 잡자야겠다. 이거지. 네가 들어오래. 다디 탐지를 잡았다.
Very difficult. Like there's like this idea of some universal, like all-pervasive I, and so I formulated it in that way. I hope this is in your interest. Whether the self depends on this all-pervasive kind of self that is some kind of universal self.
다 배나 다 캄보디나 로로 미스 나와 있나? 캄보디나 미 나와 있나? 무슨 상황이 잡혀요, 찾았다.
So when we say in this room there is a human being, then actually saying a human being that pervades all of us.
마에 캄보디나 미를 코에 캄보디나 미를 슬리피카 캄보디나 미스 상황이 잡혀요, 찾아와.
So Geshe himself is a human in this room. Geshe in front of him is also a human in this room. So basically, in that sense, there is this human, being a human, pervades everyone in this room who is a human.
이네다 미디 레네 파셀 캄보디나 남이 미세지 요르다. 디 말에 캄보디나 미처럼 말에 쳬르베 말에 레네 파셀 비슐라
So basically then if we say, who is this person in this room? Like this all-pervasive, is it me? Is it Geshe? Is it someone else? Is that this person? So actually, if we eliminate any person in this room, there is no separate I that is left. So there's no separate, if you were to remove all the humans, there's no separate I to be found. So just from the point of view that I'm a human, you're a human, everyone else is a human, from that point of view we can say there is being a human that pervades everyone. But if you analyze that kind of all-pervasive kind of I, it doesn't exist as some kind of independent entity that exists as of being a different nature from each human here. That in a sense you could eliminate all humans here and you could still be left with this human. That is not accepted. From a Buddhist point of view, that doesn't exist. But in some of the Hindu traditions, in some of the Indian philosophical, non-Buddhist Indian philosophical systems, they do talk about such a separate kind of I, a separate kind of entity, a universal type of I that is permanent, that is all-pervasive, that exists as being of a different entity from other I's, from other selves.
So in Buddhism, we try to be all compassionate, all loving, but I find sometimes when I see suffering in other people, and especially animals, it causes suffering within myself. So I wondered if you had any advice on where we're physically unable to help every being, how to deal with that suffering from compassion.
Where are you? Okay, I'll make sure I understand your question. First, I repeat it. So, what I understood you said was that trying to be compassionate, I mean, you were practicing yourself, trying to be compassionate with other living beings, but when you see the suffering of other animals and other, in particular animals and other human beings, you yourself feel suffering. And so how can you deal with this suffering? How you can reproduce that kind of suffering you experience yourself upon witnessing the suffering of others?
Where I'm not able to physically help.
And how can you help?
Where I'm not able to help.
Oh, where you're not able to help. How can you accept your own limits?
Yes.
Right? And not to suffer and accept your own limits.
Accept the limits and the suffering that causes me inside to not be able to help.
Okay. 뭐는 ninja kalora ko ninja 공교 ninja 플랜다는 데이나요. ninja 대답이나 sem진 준을 하고도 갔을때 미시험을 도지래요. 강에 도지면서 그랬나 ninja 기도 이나야. 준조에서 sem진 준줄래야 상당 강에 도지 통해서 말해요. 고라는 강에 지도. 고라의 강에 지도. 고라 시행이 동기도 통해서 말 고라의 용의 도지 기도. 하고도 고라 체마토야 도지. 다 거기가 강에 쉬고 여바이네요. 고라 체마토가 돼 리안 고라 강에 쉬고 수도. 다른데 진정의 강의디 뉴를 다야라 다시 가려요. 다 소소 직 가로다. 강 제트야 새 여바디. 다지 그런 강의식 지 그런 강의식 수를 그런 딱다지 지못 해야지. 어디 강의디 뉴도 다야라 다시 가요.
다 지난해 저와 다 야보 나오러다 다다디 다시는 이제 이제 되게 간도 제가 다 저와 야보 차려라. 다 저와 야보 임버치다 다 제마투미 지획 되고 예 제춘이 제마투비가다 다 되지 야주디네로 가디추스 메나니 되는 거 제지펜스 인추스 유나니 미거 제지유스 이게 편도 요구를.
So when you engage in certain actions, or when you try to benefit another person, so you engage in positive actions, but sometimes you cannot benefit another person, you should think of, it's somewhere written on this wall, you should think of a sentence from or a verse from the Bodhisattva where it says, if there's no remedy, if there's a remedy to the situation, yeah, if you look around, there's somewhere it says it there. Oh, there it is, yeah. So if there's a remedy to a certain situation, you can help, you can do something, why should you worry? If there is no remedy, what is the need, what is the use of worrying? So to reflect upon this verse, if you reflect upon this verse, that Geshe suggests might help you.
No, beta Thubten Palsang is a share and it's also Pagakan trading in Sinjin to Mino, the idea, the Dominion where the Queen of Himale. It's also that Chituba in the Chimatu, the Associate of Himale. Could you watch on a Kinchana quit to me that did the Tare? Associate and the Chituba, the Ine, you should not Chevaina, and one error, Associate Vanishing, Sinjin Tatai to Chetu, your hair.
So, but then if you take the Buddhist kind of view, you think about, you take into consideration Buddhist philosophical ideas or the Buddhist view, you come to understand that, first of all, it's not in the nature of someone to suffer, in the sense that the suffering can be removed, so it's not in the nature of this person to suffer. And secondly, it is in the nature of our own mind that we actually can do something. We can actually do something. So, in the sense, we have that potential. We have the potential to train our mind, to transform our mind in such a way that at some point we become, we transform ourselves to such a degree that we can do exactly what we wish to do. We can be most beneficial to another person if we apply certain techniques, if we transform our mind. So this is kind of the sense, if you become familiar with that, this sense that you can actually transform yourself to a person who can actually ultimately benefit other sentient beings.
Jezanta Nambegi ta Taju Yuding Chiki, any Tiji Kenche of Luzane, Tachi to Mudu, Tiji Yinza Masangi to say Samodi, any Shuchimu.
So it's basically when you encounter those situations from a Buddhist point of view, so having an understanding of these Buddhist ideas, that when certain conditions arise that you cannot do something in this situation, that should motivate you to generate the wish to become a Buddha when you can actually benefit other sentient beings. So when you encounter those situations, to allow this to become a condition for your aspiration to become enlightened. So in that moment you should take that as an opportunity to think, therefore, because of now myself not being able to do something, therefore I should become a Buddha. So this becomes a method to yourself to generate the wish to become a Buddha yourself. So basically, from a Buddhist point of view, this is kind of a method to you becoming a Buddha, in the sense that if you think that in this situation I cannot benefit this person, I cannot really do anything, so therefore I really need to become a Buddha. It's one of the causes, the main causes is compassion. In terms of becoming a Buddha, one of the main causes is compassion. So because of compassion for this person, therefore you generate the wish, I need to become a Buddha, so I need to benefit all sentient beings. So this person, their problem, becomes kind of the condition, becomes one of the causes for you to generate compassion for all sentient beings. So in that way, this person's suffering becomes the cause for you generating compassion for all sentient beings, and thereafter the wish to become a Buddha, etc. But in terms of that kind of attitude, this kind of way of thinking, a lot of explanation needs to be given for that to actually fully make sense. So on top of that, if you look at it from a different angle, actually the kind of suffering we experience when we perceive other beings suffering, that type of suffering is not the same type of suffering that arises in our mind as a result of attachment, anger, etc. It's a different type of suffering. This is how it's been explained. So if we actually get unhappy because of compassion or because of perceiving the suffering of another person, it doesn't make us unhappy from deep within. There's no unhappiness from deep within, and it doesn't really disrupt our mind. Whereas on the other hand, any kind of unhappiness that is connected to the holding onto an I, that is a different type of suffering. That is a type of suffering that really makes
kind of disrupts our own mind. It's a different type of suffering. So actually, if you think that so far, our happiness has been I. It's been in relation to the I. We've suffered because of our sense of I. And then to think, well, now for the first time, because of compassion for others, I've experienced a different type of suffering. Oh, that's great. Actually, to rejoice in the fact that you experience a different type of suffering that does not connect to the I. And what is also strange, what happens if you accept that suffering, the suffering will disappear. So this is also something weird, actually, that when you just accept it, it'll go on its own. So it's like when you think I shouldn't suffer, suffering grows stronger. But on the other hand, if you think it's okay that I suffer, it's okay, then the suffering goes away. So it seems like suffering is kind of deceiving you, it's kind of playing a game with you. One more question.
I was wondering regarding situations where there's very, very difficult people, not just difficult people, but people that are causing immense suffering to others. And you're trying to cultivate compassion towards all beings, but you see that there's one group of people causing immense physical and or mental suffering to another group. How does one approach that with compassion, and especially if words aren't enough to kind of remedy that situation?
So the question here is with regard to how do you practice compassion in a difficult situation such that you have basically two groups of people. One group of people who causes immense suffering to another group of people, like physical as well as mental suffering. And so having compassion for everyone involved, those, the perpetrators as well as the victims. And when words are not enough, when words will not help to solve the situation, how can you try and solve this problem effectively? Is that your question?
While maintaining compassion. Yeah.
While, of course, yeah, out of compassion, from within compassion, doing so. Is that your question?
그런 컨디션 디레다 닌지 공부 참발라 그나 삼장지 야 내수지 주나 내수지 간데레슬라바이나 미 몽고시다 디파라시다 녀도요치다 데라지 촌이라고요나 초직디 semji chiendela 강의 쉬우서시 루이다 sem기 강의 쉬우서네 아니 파주미나 딱 강의 쉬우테라 디겐체는 다 디데시는 소소문데 닌지 인간에 닌지 인간이다 하로다 강의 수익인들라 양 닌지 깨라 아니 강의 지 제인들라 양 강의 닌지 깨라 다 연주 쪽으로 강의 체야라 간데스 탑시 체여라 아니 하바두 갑딜라 양지 소소 연수적으로 니지께라 다 정말 니지께라 근데 이 강의를 그랬어요 두고래 하버드 상단직에는 내서도 주는 수수 끼시셔야 돼 주고 뱅그말에 담이 너희 경기들은 가야게 치료 끼시셔야 주고 뱅그말에 담당 양직 자꾸 돈이야 값이 치워 손선다 정말 지구쪽으로 가서는 수수 니지 군에 나네 상관의 진지시가 칼로다 뱀벨라가 감듯이 다지 독재체인들이야 뱀벨라 다 델라미니야 뱀벨라 도체 양 칼로다 지금 동부까지 강에 제긴 된소라 양가 지금 원수 쪽마다 강에 세야라 닌지 군에나는 강에 세야라 삼선 자꾸기 전에 강에 세고네요 다도 닌지 군에나는 데다 세야라 답시
디 베제타 주디 준데디기 구쟁마마 루지지오레 디시나 베제티나로네 레자기도
동아마
아
잠시 생각해 봐. So actually, in order to answer your question, Geshe says it may be most effective to tell you the story of the Buddha in a previous life when he was a Bodhisattva.
다 도디체 아니 가제다 참바만 보지냐도 조회가라 아니 디나로네 아니 참바만 치링이 마치 주심 바사 용이되는 세. 다 감들이야 디나로네 미치기 다 참바 용서 세지 아니 So
the story is about the Buddha when he was a Bodhisattva, and he was in a situation where he was with a lot of business people, a lot of merchants.
And many of them, and at that time, so most of these merchants were actually bodhisattvas, as in like they had very strong imprints of the practice of bodhicitta. But one of those merchants, he had the intention to kill all the other merchants to gain the wealth, like to gain their possessions, to kind of steal their possessions. So the Buddha at the time, when he was with these merchants, being a bodhisattva himself, he had a dream at night where he met some kind of celestial being who told him, this is the intention of this particular person, in this kind of saying that this person is planning on killing all these bodhisattvas, and as a result of that, this person will be reborn in the lower realms and experience a lot of suffering. Moreover, he will kill other bodhisattvas. So he said to him, think of what you can do in this situation, how you can solve this problem. So the Buddha agrees, like as a bodhisattva, being in that situation, so he couldn't come up with any solution. He thought about long and wide as like, how can I solve this problem? How can I stop this situation? And he came to the conclusion in the end that if he killed the potential murderer, this was the only way to stop him. So killing this potential murderer would mean that this potential murderer would not go into the lower realms, and he could free those bodhisattvas. He could make sure they don't die and continue to live. And basically the only consequence of that would be that he would go into the lower realms because of this negative action. And so he took it upon himself, out of this motivation, to benefit the potential murderer as well as the bodhisattvas, and killed this person. So there are two different interpretations or explanation of that story. So one interpretation, one explanation is the explanation of some scholars who say that from one perspective, this person has accumulated. So they have accumulated the great virtue in terms of saving the life of so many people. But this person has also accumulated the non-virtue of killing one person. But the virtue of saving all the other beings' lives outnumbers or outweighs the non-virtue of killing this one person. Then the second interpretation, or the second explanation of this is saying that there is no non-virtue whatsoever, even though you killed this other person. Why? Because the intention was never to harm this person. The intention of the Bodhisattva killing this person was to help him, that this person will not be reborn in the lower realms to experience even greater problems. So this can be compared, for instance, to a surgeon who actually, in order to help the person that they're operating on, they're cutting them open and they're actually giving them creating a lot of pain for them. But there's no non-virtue for the surgeon because they're actually saving this person's life. They're actually trying to benefit them. That's the second explanation.
yore, Geshe Thupten yore. Chesan soso hagor mado mil la thuma rese tirita. Kui kunong kari yore, dila ten Thubten kari tingu yore. Di chazan shena an shine ko tujari ko ya la thuma. Dini de hama gona, di yabore di tujari kyun la thuma.
So those who have stable bodhicitta, those bodhisattvas who have stable bodhicitta, they may engage in actions that from the outside seem to be negative. They may steal, they may beat someone, they may engage in all sorts of activities that when you don't understand their motivation seem negative. But their motivation, so from the point of view of their motivation, if you when you understand their motivation and also the result that they're aiming for, then it's very difficult to say is it a good action or negative action. It just depends on really the motivation and their final goal.
이내 다 지단 때도 요레스. 저 지금 주신 게 사도 타지도 잡고 장장 기자 말을 잡고 제 요레스. 대인내 저 주신 때보면은 내 담보 아니나 디지요 말에 손산지. 그래서는 담보 셈상보제 닝지군에 나네 디체가 저리 곱실이 양대 요레스. 제선 때보만 예보도 디지요 말에 다네다 비어 말레스. 저 주신 때보제 사비 제가 아는 시기 원다 뭐 보다부터 신의 페나 소 진다 디지요 거.
So in general, this is in general the case, but these kind of actions, such as beating, etc., they should only be done by someone who is very strong and stable bodhicitta. So the Buddha himself has advised those who've just generated bodhicitta, who are new to this, they should not engage in those actions. It's too dangerous in the sense that initially when you set out to engage in an action that is potentially forceful and could be even kind of forcefully beat someone, etc. So in that moment your intention may be a positive one, but due to the force of habit, because we're used to be angry, etc., in a situation when we harm someone, that may switch around and we may actually harm the other person because then our good intention changes into a negative one. So therefore the Buddha has basically said himself, has advised for beginners not to do that. It needs to be someone who has very stable bodhicitta, who's very stable in his bodhicitta so that the motivation does not change. And so they can really benefit the other person. So this should be enough for today. Of course, Geshe will continue on this weekend, so for you to know, on Saturday and Sunday from 2 to 4, we will continue and the main topic will be on bodhicitta. On emptiness. So Gena will recite a dedication prayer, and the meaning of this for the dedication prayer is, may the precious bodhicitta mind that has not yet arisen, may that arise and grow, and may that which has arisen arise and grow even further. Or may not degenerate, may the bodhicitta mind that has arisen, may that not degenerate, and may that which has arisen arise more and more. May the bodhicitta mind that has not yet arisen arise and grow, and may that which has arisen not decline but increase forevermore. That's the question. And then there's another verse which says, as long as space remains, as long as sentient beings remain, may I also remain to remove the suffering of sentient beings. So Geshe will do those two prayers as a dedication for our session here today.
Ese dani